Okay, so in the previous video, we did a simple Flask app, and you can see that here. This is what it looked like. Put in a name, my name here, and submit, and it says, hello, name, thanks for submitting form. So we're gonna expand our app a little bit and add a bit more to it. So first we're gonna make a more complex form and do some handling of form submission. And then we're gonna do some validation of the form using some JavaScript. All right, so we're gonna do first is add another form. Say our website has a feedback form. So people come to our website and they want to give feedback, or we have a link for feedback. So we're going to create a route for that feedback form as before, app route, and it'll be feedback will be the route. The methods, because we are going to actually set this up so that this page submits to itself. So the methods will be get and post. And now we're going to create a function for this. So we need to check to see whether or not we are getting a get or post, and then we will have different behavior based on that. So if this route is being accessed as a post, we are going to check that request method and check after request method posts equals posts. Then we want to grab the name field from the form, request.form name, and then email request.form email. We're going to get the email address from the Gmail, the email from the form. We're going to get the comment that they put in the feedback form. So comment is going to be equal to request.form comment. Okay, we're going to do some simple validation here. We're going to check if the email or the comment, any of the fields are not filled in. Okay, then we're going to say, please fill in all fields. Okay, and you're going to change that a little bit later with some JavaScript so that it can be done inside of the browser, but this is going to be inside of Flask that's going to be doing the validation. We'll change it so that we, like I said, use JavaScript to validate it later. Once we have all that, we're going to return redirect URL for thank you, and we'll create the route for thank you in a bit. Do I have enough parentheses here? I do have enough parentheses. That is not my issue. What is my issue here? Ah, yes. I'm using the redirect keyword, but I forgot to import that. So we can go back up to the top here. We have requests. We also need to add redirect, and we need to add URL for as well. Okay. Also, this is not the equality. 2 equal signs is equality. 1 equal sign is assignment. Slight bug there that we fixed. All right. So now we don't have any errors or underlines from Visual Studio Code complaining about our code. All right. So we are going to return at the bottom here, render template feedback form .html. Now, to be clear, we only return this down here on line 23 if this is false. If this is true, if the route is being accessed as a post, the request method is a post, then all of this is being run. So the return is going to be different. The return is either going to give a 400 saying that the name, email, and comment have to be filled in, or we'll accept all the information and redirect to the thank you route. We're not saving any of the data right now. Saving the data is going to be in a future lesson about databases. We are checking to see whether or not all the data has been filled in. All right, so now let's create the route for the thank you. And then after that, we will create the template, the feedback form template. So we're going to say at app.route, and the route will be thank you. It says right here when we're in the function will be thank you as well with an underscore. Okay, and this is just going to return some text similar to the submit function that we created up here. It'll say return thank you for your feedback. That's it. I'm actually going to close the terminal down here until I need it again. All right, assuming we don't have any typos, and we'll see again when we try to restart the server. That's going to be it for our app or additions that we're adding to the app. What we need to do now is create this template that we're referencing in this route. So to do that, we go over to the templates, and then we create a new document here. It's going to be feedback form.html. Just like before, you can use Emmet to create a quick template here. We are going to change this title to feedback form, and I'm actually going to grab this line from our index.html. In the future lessons, I will show you how to do templating so we don't have to repeat things over and over again. That's the power of templating. Right now, the templates look like regular HTML except for this element right here, but in the future, you notice these two HTML documents have a lot of code that are exactly the same. So it'd be great if we're going to use templates to reuse some of the code. And I'll show you how to do that in a future lesson. All right, so inside the body, we are going to say feed back form. We are going to, of course, create a form here as well. The action is going to be itself. So we're just going to say feedback form. And the method is going to be posts. And I'm going to have a label here. Label will be name inside of the tags. And then I'm going to have an input and will be text. The ID will be name. And the name will be I think before I said we were pulling from the ID, we're actually pulling from the name in Flask. When we're using JavaScript, we're usually pulling from the ID. Anyway, required, this is a required field, and putting required here, so there's going to be multiple validation checks. The browser will do a validation check if you have inside of your HTML required. We're going to do some validation with Flask, which we have right here to make sure that all the required fields are in. And also later on, we're going to add some JavaScript to check as well to validate the form. All right, so our next label will be email between the tags, email, and we have an input for email as well. Similar to before, with name, ID is going to be email, name is going to be email, and this is going to be required. And finally, I'm going to do a label, and it's going to be for the comment, and between the tags, we will put comment, and then the end, it's going to be a text area. Okay, ID, name will be comment, ID will be comment. We would leave it right now to 30 columns and 10 rows. We can adjust it if we need to. In between here, I'm going to say enter your comments here in between tags. Finally, we need a button. So button type will be submit, and I will put submit between the tags. All right. Lastly, what I'm going to do is add a script for our JavaScript. Say source is going to be equal to, I'm going to use some more Jinja templating here. URL for, and then we're going to say static, comma, file name, scripts.js. Okay. Let's hit for our HTML. Next, we are going to add to our styles, our HTML form rather. Next, we're going to add to our styles. All right, so a lot of this we're going to keep the same. Font family, Imperial, background is fine. We're going to add to our margin here. Going to say margin, it's going to be 20 pixels for the file, and the padding is going to be 20 pixels as well. So down here in our form section and properties here, we're going to background color of white, 20 pixels, change the border radius to 5 pixels. Shadow box is fine, I think. Yeah, we're going to leave that the same. And here we have input. And actually, I added this earlier. You might just have text area, or you might just have input. You need to have a comma text area so that they have the same styles applied. I'm also going to put input equals type email. Let me actually check, no equal sign there. Type email. Let me save this real quick and jump back here. Make sure the type is correct. So right here, the type for this email address should have been email. Again, you're adding the type so that the browser knows what type of data is going to be so that it can do validation. So you want to make sure you have the right type. All right, going back over to the styles, we have our styles seem okay for this. Heading is 10. Okay, that seems fine. Button seems fine as well. You're just going to keep a lot of the same styles that we had previously. Okay, so that's good. We just added a couple things here. All right, finally, we actually need to create this script that we reference here. So in the static directory, we're going to create a document called scripts.js. And again, Visual Studio knows what JavaScript is. So we're going to add an event listener in this script. And you guys know all about event listeners by this point, but this event listener isn't going to listen for a click or anything. It's going to listen for when the entire document loads or the content is loaded. And what we are going to do is create a function here. Okay. And inside of our function, actually, make sure there's a semicolon at the end there. And inside of our function, we're going to grab the form from our document. So we're going to say const form document.query selector, and we're going to grab the form from the document, and we're going to say form.onSubmit. So we're going to put another event. I'm going to say function event. So this will be another function looking for the submit. So we're going to grab it when the document loads, but then we're going to also add another function that will check the form once it's submitted. So we're going to say if not form dot get elements by ID email dot value dot includes app, we are going to raise an alert. I say alert, please enter a valid email. Okay. And we are going to prevent default. So we'll prevent it. Quick note here, prevents the form from submitting. Okay. Inside of our app, we are already checking to see whether or not these things are empty. And the check from Flask. The JavaScript is going to load. When the document loads, it's going to grab the form. It's going to check for when the form is submitted. And if the form email is not included in that, remember this exclamation point means not, then we are going to alert them that they need a valid email address, and then we're going to prevent the submission. Let me actually put a semicolon here because that was an error, and also need a semicolon here. Okay, I think I need a semicolon down here as well. So okay, and also I'm missing a parentheses here, because the beginning of this if statement starts here and ends there. Okay, a few minor typos, but this looks fine now. I'm going to just remove this extra space, but besides that, this should work. All right, and that's pretty much it. We have multiple layers of validation. Like I said, we have the validation. If you were just writing a simple HTML document, you can ask the browser to say that this is required, okay? Then at the bottom, when this script is loaded, we had added an extra layer of validation to see whether or not the email address is a valid email address, because it has to have an @ symbol in the middle of it. And also on the server side, Flask server is also checking to see and make sure that all of these things are filled in, okay? All right, everything is saved. I'm going to press Shift-Control-tilde to open up a terminal, or the terminal that was already open. Actually, I'm going to close this one because we already have a terminal open because we're already running the server. Press Control-C to stop the server, and I'm going to do a Flask run. Assuming there's no errors, this will just start up the browser, the server again with our new changes, and we can follow the link to the index. But what we want to do is actually go to the feedback route that we created, which will load the form here. I'm going to put on my name, and then I'm going to say this is my feedback, but I'm going to leave the email alone and press submit. And we get the validation from the browser that this form needs to be filled in. All right, so let's put in Chris not found. You know what? There's an error in our code. In our form right here, our HTML, I said the route is feedback form. It's actually just feedback. See here, we created the route. It's just feedback. So when we click submit, it was trying to submit to itself, but there is no feedback form. All right, so feedback form is the name of the HTML document template that we're using. All right, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to stop the server by going down here and pressing Control-C, and then I'm going to run the server again. Instead of clicking on the link, we already have it open, so I'm just going to jump back over to the browser over here and just go back and then refresh. Okay, so now we can submit, and it says thank you for your feedback. Could go back and try to submit here, and it says you need an email address, and I think this is some of the browser validation, because remember here in the HTML we said that this is an email. All right, so over here I'm actually going to change this to the input from email to text to actually show you something. If the browser wasn't validating it and we actually put an error in here and we didn't tell it that this specific index or this specific input is email, and we accidentally said text like I did before I added it, or I changed it when I was updating the CSS. If we stop the server and we go back and we run it again after that change, the validation should still work, but it's not going to work as effectively as it did before, because it will check to see if the information is in there, or information is in there. So I'm going to actually go back over here, and I'm going to empty this and then submit. It'll say still say please fill out, because we said that this is required. Back in the HTML right here, we said that this field is required, even though it's not labeled correctly as the right type. So if I put something in here, hello, let me actually refresh. If I put hello in here, it should take it. The JavaScript should have stopped this though. So let me go back and inspect this and see if the JavaScript is loading. Get The form dot not a function. Okay, so there's an issue with our JavaScript. So let's go over and troubleshoot that. Let's go back over here to our JavaScript, get element by ID. Okay, actually, let's just do document instead of form. Document get element by ID. We're going to say, we're going to still get the ID email because while we change the type, the ID is still email. And we save that, and we are going to stop our server by pressing Control-C, and then we are going to run it again and go back over here and refresh. Okay, now we have no errors for the JavaScript. And here again, we have our name, we have an invalid email address, and we have some feedback. Okay, so now if we press submit, what do we have? It's like we have another issue with our JavaScript because it should not have, our JavaScript should have stopped our submission there. So let's go back and see what else we need to fix in our JavaScript. So back over here to our code. Let's see what else could be wrong here. Form on submit, we are going to add a function f document.get element. This should be get element, not elements. We're getting only one element here. Email value includes, and then we're going to say an alert, which seems fine, and save that. Press Control-C, do a quick run again, refresh this page. This is why debugging is important. Spend a lot more time debugging sometimes than writing code. All right, so we're going to try to submit this again, and then we get it. Please enter valid email address. All right, so we're going to say at dot, and then we can submit. All right, so as I said, multiple ways to validate. Now, the only reason that we had to fall back to the JavaScript is because I introduced an error in our code. If your user is using a modern browser and you set this to email, it will check to make sure it's a proper email address. So you don't need that JavaScript, but you don't know necessarily whether or not the person or the user using your website is going to be using a newer browser. So the JavaScript is basically backup to make sure that you get a valid email address. So you don't have to depend on the browser stopping them from submitting a bad email address. So there are multiple layers of validation here. Validation, if the browser fails, we'll use the JavaScript for backup to make sure that the email address is correct. And of course, if the browser fails to make sure that these required fields are not in here, we'll use the, again, application, Flask application here, this line, to validate the form. All right, that's it until the next lesson.